You don't need a revolution to change your life. You just need a decision made at a moment that might seem insignificant. Every morning you wake up as a reminder that today can be the beginning of a better version of yourself. Not because the world outside has changed, but because something inside you has stopped accepting the old way of living. Progress doesn't come from perfection. It comes from choice. A simple but meaningful choice to keep moving forward, even when you don't feel ready. Progress doesn't need to be loud, doesn't need a stage to perform on, doesn't need applause to validate it. It grows quietly in the small actions you repeat when no one is watching. One time you choose to focus instead of scrolling on your phone. One time you wake up just 15 minutes earlier to start the day right. One time you sit down to write what you've been putting off for too long. Those seemingly trivial moments are the very foundation of all deep and lasting change. No one sees the progress you're making in silence, but you can feel it in how your thoughts become clearer, in the way you begin to have more control over your emotions than you did yesterday, in the fact that you start keeping promises to yourself, even if it's just the promise to get up on time. That is progress. It doesn't require talent. It doesn't need anyone's permission. It only needs you to stop accepting waking up each day and repeating an outdated version of yourself. Most people wait for a big opportunity, a dramatic push, a life-changing event. But the big opportunities are always hidden inside the small actions you've long underestimated. Life doesn't change overnight, but it always begins to shift in a single moment when you decide to act differently. The issue isn't that you need to be perfect to begin. The issue is how many days you've wasted waiting to feel ready. Perfection is a sweet trap. It keeps you preparing endlessly, procrastinating endlessly, always waiting just a bit longer. But today, even if you lack the knowledge, the confidence, the motivation, you can still begin. Not perfect, but honest. Not strong, but committed. Not fast, but steady. That is the true foundation. Look back at yourself 1 year ago. No need to compare with anyone else. Are you speaking to yourself more kindly now? Are you managing your emotions better? Have you dared to step out of your fears, even just a little? If the answer is yes, that is progress. And if you haven't yet done those things, today is still an opportunity. No one can hold you back but you. You may have failed before, you may have quit before, you may have broken promises to yourself, but nothing in your past has the right to cancel out the action you choose today. You are not obligated to live inside the old frame of your past just because you once made mistakes. You only need one thing. Each day, do one thing better than you did the day before. One better decision, one calmer reaction, one new limit reached. You don't have to go far, just don't turn back. And don't think that only big steps have value. The truth is, every breakthrough is born from the discipline of small steps, repeated quietly. Success doesn't arrive with thunder. It's built in the mornings you wake up and still take action, even on days you don't feel excited. The strong are not those who always feel ready, but those who act, even when they don't feel ready at all, because they understand that motivation doesn't come before action, it comes after. You take action and then clarity comes. You stay disciplined and then confidence follows. You do the work and then you believe. Don't wait to feel confident before you begin. Begin and let that build your confidence. Every day is an opportunity, a small victory, a moment of overcoming laziness, a moment of resisting temptation, a moment of writing the next chapter in the story you're building. And if you continue collecting enough of those small wins, they will transform you. They will turn you into the person you once only dreamed of becoming. There is no shortcut to the better version of yourself, but there is always a path, and it always begins with one step. Today. Just today. You need enough humility to begin again, and enough courage to not give up. Don't wait until you're perfect. Start in your imperfection, and let progress take you further than any expectation you ever had. Many people live as if they're pre-programmed. Each morning they open their eyes and check their phones out of reflex, sip coffee out of habit, go to work because it's time to, and end the day feeling drained without really knowing what they lived for. They're not lazy, they simply never learned how to live intentionally. And if you don't design goals for your own life, you'll be swept into the goals of others, often people who don't care who you become. The only way not to drift through life is to have an anchor to hold on to each day. Daily goals aren't meant to make you busier. They're meant to keep you alert. They're the compass pulling you out of survival mode where everything feels repetitive, dull, and lifeless. When you start your day without a clear goal, it's easy to fall into the trap of reflex, reacting to what's urgent instead of doing what's important. You reply to emails without asking if they're truly necessary. You scroll endlessly because you don't know what else to do. You feel overwhelmed by a pile of aimless tasks and wonder why you're not making progress. Meanwhile, someone else with the same 24 hours as you chooses to write down just one goal for the day, not to complete a list as long as a scroll, but to focus their presence, willpower, and energy on one thing that moves them closer to the person they want to become. It could be the important call they've delayed, the piece of writing they've committed to finishing, the workout they promised themselves they wouldn't skip. They don't need the whole world to see it. They just need to know they're living with intention. You don't need 10 goals to feel motivated. You just need one goal that's meaningful enough to keep you from sliding back into your old patterns. Don't confuse being busy with making progress. The truth is, many people are busy all day but move very little because they don't actually know where they're headed. Without a goal, every action is just dispersion. With a goal, every step becomes accumulation. And here's the most important part. The smaller, simpler, and more repeatable a goal is each day, the greater its power. A good goal doesn't have to be grand. It just needs three things: clarity, actionability, and a demand that you stretch just a bit beyond yesterday. It shouldn't be easy, but it shouldn't be impossible either. It should sit in the zone of reasonable challenge where instinct alone won't get you through, but conscious choice will. That's where growth happens. You can write your goal down on paper, on a whiteboard, or in your phone, but the real power doesn't lie in documentation. It lies in commitment. The commitment that says, today, no matter what happens, I will get this done. And if you keep that promise, repeating it day after day, you'll begin to notice something strange. Your belief in yourself grows, not because others praise you, but because you see yourself maturing through every small act. Every time you finish your goal, you're sending a signal to your brain, I'm someone who can be trusted. Every time you do what you said you would, even if it's just a small step, you're carving in a new identity. I'm someone who knows what they want and takes action to get it. That's no longer theory, that's self-reprogramming. And when you become someone who always keeps your word to themselves, everything else starts to shift. Your confidence, your focus, and your rate of growth. You might ask, how long can I keep setting daily goals? The answer is, until living with purpose is no longer a strategy, but a reflex. By then, you won't need to force yourself. Your very identity will demand clarity. Your thinking won't tolerate beginning a new day without knowing what it's for. And if one day you happen to drift off course, you'll notice quickly and come back because you've become familiar with the feeling of living with direction, with intention, with ownership over every minute you spend. That is an awakening no one can take from you. If your life has ever felt dull, unclear, or stagnant, start with one small goal today. Just one. Don't be greedy. Just make sure it's not something you do out of habit, but something that pulls you forward. If you can do it today, tomorrow will be easier. If you can keep it going tomorrow, in a week you won't want to stop. And if you're still doing it a month from now, your life will begin to change direction. Daily goals aren't just a way out of automatic living. They're the way to start living fully, awake, intentional, and deeply anchored in each choice. Because people with goals aren't just living, they're leading. What you fear doing the most is often exactly what you most need to do. Fear is not a signal to avoid. It is the clearest indicator of where your limits are. Every time your heart races, your palms sweat, and your mind wants to delay, that's when you're standing right at the threshold of a breakthrough. And if you don't step through, you'll remain imprisoned in an invisible box built from what-ifs. Growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. It only happens in places that feel suffocating, anxious, and unstable, because those are the places that force you to stretch beyond your old self. There's no feeling more uncomfortable than doing something new, but there's no greater reward than daring to act while trembling. Every time you step into a situation that scares you, you are expanding your personal frontier. And the very moment you choose to do the hard thing, you are no longer the same person. Most people want change, but they build lives that avoid everything that makes them uncomfortable. They avoid telling the truth for fear of rejection, avoid starting for fear of failure, avoid moving forward for fear of not being good enough. But avoidance doesn't make fear disappear. It only allows it to grow silently. The more you hide, the more it clings to you. The more you delay, the more it ties you up in the illusion of safety. And the cost of that comfort is wasted potential. Confidence doesn't come from encouragement, it comes from action. When you do the thing that makes you tremble and realize you survived, you begin to rewrite your self-definition. You no longer believe that voice in your head saying, "I can't do it," because you just did. And next time, you'll do it again. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's feeling afraid and doing it anyway. No one is born fearless, but some people learn to face fear and others learn to retreat. One side becomes stronger, the other only weakens in silence. The interesting thing is, the action that scares you is often much smaller than you imagine. The conversation you've been avoiding for so long turns out to be less frightening than you thought. The speech that kept you up at night becomes the beginning of a major turning point. The decision you've been putting off ends up opening an entirely new path. Every time you choose action over escape, you don't just reach an outcome, you rebuild your inner structure of self-trust. A single step taken in fear is worth more than 1,000 steps taken in ease. The issue is you can't wait until you're no longer afraid to act. That moment will never come. You act first and confidence will follow. Step into the uncertain. Do the thing that makes you breathe heavily. Say the words that make your heart pound, because that's where your shell begins to crack. And inside that shell is the version of you that you've been searching for. If every day you do one thing that scares you, a rejection you accept, a time you dare to say no, an email you finally send, a decision you commit to, you'll see yourself grow in ways you never expected. Because strength doesn't come from smooth sailing. It comes from continuing forward even when your heart still trembles. Want to truly grow? Write down 5 things you've been avoiding, then pick one and do it today. Don't wait for courage. Don't wait for perfection. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Just give yourself permission to step through the fear. If you fail, it's experience. If you fumble, that's normal. But if you dare, that's bravery. No one grows in the shade. You have to step into the light, even if that light blinds you, scares you, and feels unfamiliar. That's the price of progress. And the more you dare to step out, the more that light becomes something you can't live without. Don't wait for readiness. Use action to build it. Because only in the moments when you tremble but still step forward will you truly feel free. And that kind of freedom no one can give you. You earn it when you dare to face your own fears. That's why growth always comes with unease. There's nothing wrong with being afraid, but there's a serious problem if you let fear dictate how you live. Everything great you want to build lies on the other side of the action you're avoiding. And if you're still hesitating, remember this. The more you avoid doing what scares you, the more you become someone you can't respect. But every time you step into discomfort, even just once, you reclaim ownership of yourself. That is what true growth looks like. Tomorrow always sounds reasonable. It gives you an excuse to breathe easier, a little buffer to postpone decisions, a promise that seems harmless, just a little more time. But tomorrow, the day you keep mentioning but never actually live in, is one of the sweetest lies ever told. It soothes the guilt of the present while quietly draining your motivation to act now. You're not procrastinating because you're lazy. You're procrastinating because you believe you still have time, that opportunities will wait, that inspiration will return. But that's just your brain tricking itself to avoid difficulty, fear of failure, and the feeling of not being ready. The more you nurture the thought, I'll do it tomorrow, the more you erode your own self-trust. Because every time you push something important to the next day, you're silently telling yourself it's not truly urgent. Then one day you wake up and realize you've been living in a string of days where you almost started, but never actually did. Procrastination doesn't just steal your time, it steals your self-respect. Deep down, you know what needs to be done, and when you keep avoiding it, you gradually lose your sense of control, your sense of agency. The biggest procrastinators are often the most self-critical, not because they're incapable, but because they're living disconnected from what they know is right. You don't need to do everything today, but you do need to begin. And there is no better time than now, even if you don't have the perfect plan, even if you don't feel fully motivated, even if you're unsure you'll do it well. Action is always more valuable than any intention left untouched. Think back to everything you've longed to do, the career you want to pursue, the book you want to write, the habit you want to build, the relationship you want to improve. What's really stopping you? Is it truly a lack of time? Or are you waiting for an ideal emotional state, that so-called spark, or perfect readiness? The bad news is that state may never come. But the good news is you don't need it to begin. All you need is a clear enough commitment, a small enough first step, and enough decisiveness to do it. Without looping through another round of thinking, procrastination is always wrapped in logic. You'll think, just wait a few more days for things to settle. This week is packed. Next week I'll focus. Or when I have free time, I'll get to it. But that's not logic. That's avoidance wearing a reasonable disguise. Because you already know spare time won't magically appear, ideal conditions won't arrange themselves, and opportunities, if not seized, will land in someone else's hands. Each time you're about to postpone something important, ask yourself, if not today, then when? If not me, then who? And if I don't act now, am I willing to keep living with this regret? Face the true cost of procrastination. You don't just lose time, you lose resolve. Because every small decision to do it later builds into a major habit. The habit of backing down when things get hard. The habit of waiting for perfection before acting. The habit of living vaguely instead of with focus. And you already know. Habits form identity. The more you procrastinate, the more you become someone even you can't fully trust. But just one action today, no matter how small or unfinished, can change your trajectory. You carve a new pathway in your nervous system, a new narrative in your mind. I'm someone who starts, someone who moves forward. And the more you act, the stronger that belief becomes. People who live differently aren't better. They just begin sooner. They don't wait until they're enough. They start in the not enough and use that as fuel to grow. They don't wait for inspiration. They act to create it. And they don't wait for the future to do what matters. They put what matters into the present, the only place where you have real influence. If there's something on your mind right now, something you know you should do but haven't, stop thinking about it. Act first, reason later. Just one email sent, one call made, one step taken, and you break the cycle of delay. And freedom doesn't come when everything is done. It comes the moment you finally start something you've waited too long to begin. Don't let tomorrow become the graveyard of what truly matters. Don't label your dreams with just a little longer when you already know they deserve pursuit. Action today doesn't need to be big, doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. And once you begin, the change has already begun. Not every action moves you forward. Not every effort means growth. You can do many things each day, but if all of them remain within your comfort zone, where little effort is required, then you're still standing still. Progress is not measured by busyness, but by how much you dare to stretch yourself. What creates the difference isn't scale, but meaning. A small action that forces you to step out of ease, to face discomfort, to do something you've never done. That action carries more weight than a long list of tasks that never touch a boundary. People often think changing your life requires a grand plan, but the truth is, life is shaped by small, repeated actions, and more importantly, actions done with intention. Each day you can choose to do just one simple thing, but it must be enough to show you that you're pushing beyond who you were yesterday. An honest conversation you've been avoiding, an exercise you skip because you don't like it, one focused hour of work without distraction instead of constantly switching tasks, one no to something that pulls your attention away. These things are not flashy, they don't draw applause, but they can fundamentally change how you see yourself. Small but meaningful actions are like laying one brick at a time, day after day, to build a solid foundation of self-trust and inner capability. Because no one becomes strong in a single moment. Real strength comes from proving to yourself daily that you can do something a little harder than the day before. That's how you expand your comfort zone without having to shatter it. We often underestimate the power of small actions because they don't create an immediate high, but that's exactly what makes them sustainable. Small actions quietly rewrite your internal reflexes. If every day you do one thing that makes you uncomfortable, yet you still act, your brain starts to realize, I'm someone who can do what's not easy. And the more you reinforce that, the more you become someone who can handle more, endure better, and respond more consciously to challenges. Doing more doesn't always mean better. Doing what's right is what matters. And right here doesn't mean according to someone else's standards, but according to where you are in your development. Right is the action that stretches you, demands your willpower, requires you to listen to yourself so you don't slip into old patterns. That's the difference between intentional action and habitual motion. When you start your day by asking, what can I do today that will make me better? You're shifting your focus to quality, not quantity. And when you commit to doing just that one thing each day, you'll clearly see a new identity doesn't come from desire. It comes from repeated, intentional action. Your limits are not fixed. They're simply the result of the actions you've repeated for too long. You've grown used to doing less, so you believe you can't do more. You've become accustomed to avoiding difficulty, so you believe you're weak. But you don't need to change all your limits in a day. You just need to gently touch the edge, one day at a time. And over time, what once made you anxious becomes something you do without thinking. That is true expansion. Sustainable growth always comes from gradually lifting your limits, not from pushing too hard and giving up. If you feel stuck in old loops, it may not be because you're doing nothing, but because you're only doing what's too easy. Easy actions give a fleeting sense of success. But hard actions, even small ones, bring lasting transformation. And hard doesn't mean complex. It simply means the thing you know you should do but avoid because it's uncomfortable, because you're afraid, because you're not sure you'll do it well. That is the one action most worth doing today. Let each day pass not with the feeling of being done, but with the feeling of, I did something I used to avoid. That's what real progress looks like. And if you can keep that rhythm, you don't need to rush. You're already moving faster than most. Because progress doesn't belong to the most talented, but to those who consistently do what's right, even when it's small, even when it's hard, even when no one sees it. One small, intentional action that stretches you just a bit, that is the atomic unit of personal growth. And if you keep stacking those atoms, you will create a new version of yourself, deeper, stronger, and far more trustworthy than who you used to be. You don't need to hurry, but you do need to choose the right action. And the right action is always the one that helps you grow, not the one that simply keeps you busy. Start today with one small thing, meaningful enough, challenging enough for you to say to yourself, I am moving forward. Failure is not the end. It's a signal that you're in the real game, the one where outcomes aren't fully controllable, where action demands courage, where mistakes are the price you pay for daring to move forward instead of standing on the sidelines. The person who never fails is not the most talented. They're the one who's never truly started. They choose safety, choose to avoid challenges, choose to repeat what they already know they can do well, and call that stability. But stability does not equal growth. Stability without development is simply regression in disguise. And the most dangerous thing isn't failure. It's stagnation wrapped in the illusion of reasonableness. You need failure, not to suffer, but to understand where you are, what you're missing, and how to adjust in order to go further. Every mistake, if you're awake enough to learn from it, contains a truth that success can't teach you. Success often makes people complacent. Failure, on the other hand, forces you to examine yourself honestly. It's uncomfortable, but it matures you. One thing truly accomplished people understand clearly: failure is an essential part of the growth ecosystem. It's not the exception, it's the rule. If you avoid failure at all costs, you're also rejecting the chance to become stronger. The way you face failure reflects exactly how resilient you are. The weak allow it to define them. I failed, so I must not be good enough. The strong see it as data. I failed, which means I just discovered an ineffective way. I'll adjust. This isn't blind optimism. It's a powerful mental strategy to prevent your spirit from being crushed by expectations and pressure. When you redefine failure, you stop fearing it. You begin to use it as a mirror, not to criticize yourself, but to understand yourself more clearly. You begin asking the right questions. What really happened? How did I act? What did I overlook? What's the lesson here? What will I do differently next time? These questions not only help you extract insight, but also allow you to retain agency. You're no longer a victim of circumstance. You become a rebuilder from your own wreckage. And from there, a new identity emerges. The identity of someone who's willing to be wrong in order to learn how to be right. Many people get stuck in guilt after one failure. They box themselves into an old story, carrying unhealed wounds like an internal sentence. But wounds don't define you. Your response to them is what shapes your future. Nothing in the past is strong enough to drag you backward unless you keep feeding it in your mind. Mistakes can be turned into assets if you're brave enough to face them, humble enough to learn, and patient enough to rebuild from scratch. Remember, everyone you admire has failed, not just once, but many times. What makes them extraordinary isn't that they never got it wrong, but that they always chose to get back up sooner than most. And in each comeback, they became more refined, more precise, more grounded, until the very things that once broke them became the foundation of their inner strength. When you fail, don't rush to conclude anything about your worth. Observe. Step back and see failure as a signal that you're entering unfamiliar territory where you must learn faster, deeper, if you want to survive. That's not a curse. It's an invitation to transform. And the earlier you fail, the more it benefits you, because you'll have time to adjust, to retry, and to rise with a stronger version of yourself. What's truly frightening isn't failing early, it's failing late, after you've lived in ease for too long and lost your resilience to hardship. Don't wait until everything is certain to act. Act to discover what's true. Mistakes may hurt, but that pain is useful if you know how to use it as an indicator instead of a sentence. Anyone truly building something great has at some point collapsed. But they didn't stop there. They used failure to recalibrate their vision, their path, and even their beliefs. They understood no one reaches the finish line with a mindset that fears being wrong. If you want to grow, you have to endure impact. If you want to be steady, you must go through storms. And if you want to be free, you must overcome the fear of being judged when you fail. If today you've just failed, be grateful. You've just received a gift many people are too afraid to accept, the truth of where you stand. And from that truth, you can begin again, this time with deeper understanding, greater resilience, and a conviction that every mistake is a milestone. Not a milestone of regression, but a milestone proving you're playing the real game, the game of those who dare to live fully. No one grows just by having experiences. True growth comes from pausing to understand what you've actually experienced. Reflection is not a luxurious mental exercise, nor is it a privilege reserved for the wise. It is an essential tool for anyone who wants to live with direction, depth, and ownership over their own life. Each day passes by carrying countless signals: how you react, how you choose, how you handle critical moments or let them slip away. If you don't stop to observe yourself, all those signals will drift away like sand slipping through your fingers. And you, thinking you're moving forward, are actually just repeating a chain of old reflexes without even realizing it. Self-reflection is not sitting down to criticize yourself. It is the highest act of awareness, deliberately observing yourself without judgment, without excuse, without avoidance. It's when you ask the kind of questions most people don't have the courage to ask. What did I do well today? What could I have done differently? Which of my reactions made the situation worse? Did I choose silence out of clarity or out of fear? Did I indulge my emotions or did I control them? These questions, when repeated daily, begin to awaken a new stream of consciousness within you, a stream that leads to true inner control. You don't need a quiet room to reflect. You only need a space of honesty. It could be at the end of the day when you turn off the lights. It could be when you jot a few lines in a journal. Or simply when you sit still for 5 minutes and review how you lived today. The important thing isn't the form, it's the quality of sincerity. Successful people are not those who do more, but those who understand themselves more clearly. And those who understand themselves better are the ones who dare to pause, even for a few minutes, to look directly at what they've done, thought, and felt. No justifications, no running, no sugarcoating. Self-reflection is the only way not to be overwhelmed by the sheer pace of life. In a world that's always rushing, if you don't know how to pause, you'll be swept away. And by the time you look back, you'll realize you've been living in reaction, not in intention. That's why those who truly own their lives never skip the moment of inner dialogue, because they know no guidance is more solid than what comes from within. No advice is more profound than what you discover by looking directly at your own behavior. And no growth strategy is more sustainable than knowing exactly what's blocking you from the inside. There will be days when you don't want to look back, because you know you didn't behave well. You broke a promise. You lost your temper. You gave up when you should have stayed strong. But those are exactly the days when you most need to examine yourself. Because if you don't dare to face your lesser self, your better self will never develop. And if you don't understand what made you stumble, you'll fall again in the same place. This time, with a new excuse. Daily reflection builds an early warning system. It helps you spot signs of decline early, before they turn into crisis. It lets you cut off bad habits at the root. It allows you to adjust your behavior before harm spreads. And most importantly, it helps you stay aligned with the person you are each day and the person you want to become. No one becomes great overnight. But all great people share one thing. They always know where they're heading, what's holding them back, and what lesson they're learning from their own life, day by day. That's the result of a disciplined, refined, and uncompromising process of self-reflection. You don't need to write a lot. You don't need to journal beautifully. You just need to ask yourself one question each day. What did I do wrong today? And commit to adjusting even just a little. That's where change begins. When you keep this habit, you'll feel something special, a groundedness from within. You won't panic when criticized because you've already seen it in yourself. You won't need others to point out what to improve because you're already doing that work daily. And you won't need anyone to validate your growth because you have the clearest proof from your own actions yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The reflection is a quiet habit, but what it creates is far from small. It shapes your presence. It nurtures your calm. It trains you to read yourself. A skill no outsider, no matter how skilled, can teach you. Don't let a day go by without asking, did I live today as a better version of myself, or just repeat the same self in a different disguise? The answer, when pursued daily, will reshape your direction. And if you're brave enough to answer honestly, you won't need anyone to lead the way. You will have become your own guide. That is true power. And it begins with the courage to look within. You don't live according to what you know is right. You live according to what you've repeated long enough for it to become default. Habits, whether helpful or destructive, all begin from the same point. They were once a choice. And once repeated often enough, they no longer require choice. They automatically drive you, shape your reflexes, determine your emotions, even influence how you evaluate yourself. But you are not trapped in that structure unless you refuse to look back at it. Your inner map is not destiny. It is a blueprint that can be revised, upgraded, and rebuilt, but only if you're aware enough to realize most of what you're doing, thinking, and feeling is not the truth, but a groove. If you've ever wondered why you keep ending up in the same situations, reacting the same way, repeating the same outcomes despite all your effort, the answer lies here. You're following an old map. Every habit you keep, whether it's procrastination, anxiety, avoidance, or justification, is a familiar path your brain has learned to prioritize. It doesn't need your conscious input, it only needs your compliance. And so you live on autopilot, thinking you have willpower while in fact being steered by a hidden system you've never rewritten. Transformation doesn't begin with willpower. It begins with recognition. Recognition that you're doing this not because it's right, but because it's familiar. You're feeling this way not because it's the only possible reaction, but because it's the way you've always reacted. You're believing this about yourself not because it's true, but because you've heard it in your mind so many times you mistook it for fact. Once you recognize that, you've stepped into the first territory of freedom. You're no longer a victim of habit. You are the observer. And the observer always has a choice. Rewriting your inner map doesn't require you to erase all your past. It simply asks that you pause before each familiar behavior and ask one question. Does this action, this thought, this emotion truly serve the person I want to become? If the answer is no, then right in that moment, you can choose a new path. At first, that path will be bumpy because it's unfamiliar. Your brain will resist. It will urge you to return to the old route, easier, faster, less risky. But if you keep walking, keep choosing the new response, keep rewriting how you talk to yourself, how you act under pressure, how you think about failure, about limits, about your own value, then each small step will create a new map. A map that leads you to true steadiness, not reacting from fear, but acting from intention. Rewriting your inner map doesn't require perfection, it requires consistency. Every time you pause in the middle of an old reflex and choose a new action, you're carving a new path. Every time you hear the voice of self-criticism and you no longer believe it, you're erasing a false definition of yourself. Every time you're about to procrastinate, but you take action anyway, you're reinforcing a new identity. I am someone who acts, even when it's not perfect. And every such moment, you're drawing a new line in the map. Remember, No one can live differently without thinking differently. No one can think differently while trapped in old patterns they haven't yet recognized. And no pattern is so strong that it can't be changed. If you're brave enough to name it, face it, and choose to rewrite it with a new behavior, you don't need to change the entire map in a single day. You just need to begin where you feel most stuck. The place where you always react the wrong way, always feel weak, always get pulled backward. That is exactly the first place to rewrite. Don't try to control your whole inner world at once. Instead, observe each familiar junction where you tend to turn into fear, avoid action, or diminish yourself, and place a new sign. One junction a day, one new choice per junction. Step by step, you're not just walking a new path. You're becoming a new person, a person who no longer lives by old instincts, but lives by a newly crafted identity, shaped little by little. And when you live long enough in that new identity, the old habits will no longer be a threat. They'll merely be memories, because you've changed the route. And that route no longer leads you back into the same loop, but toward the person you truly want to become. Rewriting your inner map is not about changing your essence. It is the journey of returning to your most original self, strong, clear-minded, and intentional. And you can absolutely do it, starting from this very moment. You don't need to be certain, you just need to begin. You don't need to draw the whole map at once. You just need to redraw it piece by piece, with awareness, with action, and with a daily commitment to living consciously. This is not the work of a week. This is a lifelong journey, and it is the most worthwhile one you could ever take for yourself. Success doesn't come from knowing many things superficially. It comes from mastering one thing deeply, steadily, and reliably. In a world that encourages multitasking, jumping from one task to another, and hoarding information instead of transforming it into skill, choosing to practice one single skill each day is not just a strategy. It's a declaration. I choose depth over breadth. I choose effectiveness over noise. I choose real progress over the illusion of busyness. You don't have to be great from the beginning. You just need to choose a skill that is important enough, essential enough, and closely tied to the version of yourself you want to become. Then commit to digging into it little by little each day. It doesn't require hours of practice, just intentional repetition in a focused state. It is the consistency, not interruption, that creates true leverage. Because a skill, when practiced correctly, not only enhances your ability, but reshapes how you think, how you respond, and how you handle situations. When you focus on refining one skill, you're sending a clear signal to your brain. This matters. This deserves priority. This is where I place my attention. And your brain, an adaptive intelligent system, will start reorganizing neurons, forming new pathways, connecting faster, remembering deeper. You don't need to become a master overnight, but if you repeat the right thing in the right state with steady frequency, that will become part of you effortlessly. Skill is not a gift. It is the result of steady, intentional, and uninterrupted investment. Every day you practice a skill, you are building a solid foundation upon which your future can stand. A strong skill can change the way you work, the way you communicate, the way you respond under pressure, and how you define your value in the marketplace. Choose a skill that creates leverage, meaning when you improve that skill, other areas of your life improve as well. It might be writing, to help you think more clearly and express more sharply. It might be speaking, to expand your influence. It might be focus, to control your energy and manage time efficiently. Or it might be decision-making, so you don't get stuck in loops of hesitation. What matters is not how hot the skill is, but how directly it serves your path of growth. And once you've chosen the skill to practice, don't be tempted by the feeling of not fast enough. Don't keep switching from one thing to another just because someone else is learning something different. The person with long-term leverage is the one who dares to ignore short-term appeal. They understand that a skill, once refined, will open doors that scattered efforts never can. 1 hour of skill training each day in a state of deep focus is worth more than a whole week of skimming through dozens of topics without retaining anything. Because when you train deeply, you're not just learning, you're reshaping reflexes. And when reflexes change, your whole operational system changes. Persistence in practice isn't about time, it's about priorities. Everyone has 24 hours, but not everyone knows how to devote even a small part of that time to accumulating what truly builds long-term value. Practicing a skill daily is also how you build trust with yourself. Every time you sit down, focus, and commit to the skill you've chosen to refine, you're proving, I am someone who can be trusted. I don't need motivation to begin. I don't need perfection to persist. I do it because I've chosen to. That trust, when built long enough, becomes inner strength. It makes you more resilient when tired, more grounded under pressure, and less swayed by distractions. And less swayed. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just practice consistently, quietly, and the results will speak for themselves. Maybe you won't see changes in a week. Maybe no one will notice in a month. But after 6 months, a year, you'll look back and realize, I've changed. I react differently. I work differently. I have an inner strength I never had before. That's a result no one can take from you. And the most valuable part is you created it, bit by bit, through your own consistency. Remember this, a skill practiced deeply can create opportunities, elevate your value, boost your confidence, and open a new path you never believed was real. But that only happens when you take training seriously, not because it's trendy, not out of comparison, but because you understand. Being truly skilled at one thing is far more powerful than knowing many things superficially. Tomorrow you will be better than today. If today you commit to refining a specific skill, just 1 hour, but an hour free from distraction, an hour that doesn't need to be perfect, only fully present, one skill, one day, one commitment. That's the leverage no one teaches you, but you can give it to yourself starting today. Not everyone who is strong starts out with confidence. Many of them walk through doubt, fear, and countless unanswered questions. But there's one thing they do differently. They don't let their journey pass by in forgetfulness. They document it, not to show off, but to remember that every step, no matter how small, how slow, how clumsy, holds real value. Because human memory is a deceiver. It magnifies fear and shrinks progress. It makes you believe you've achieved nothing even when you've come so far. Writing down your journey isn't just a habit. It's a tool for clarity. It pulls you out of the dusty haze of temporary emotions to see clearly what you've overcome, what you're striving for, and what you deserve to believe in. A daily note, a few honest lines of self-dialogue, a list of what you've accomplished. These are living proofs that you're not standing still, even when no one sees any changes, even when the results aren't yet visible, even when you yourself still feel uncertain. Documenting your journey is how you light your path with small candles. So when the night of doubt arrives, you still have a place to step forward. You don't need to write like a novelist. Just write like someone who is awake. Write so you don't forget why you started. Write to keep the fire alive on weary days. Write to remind yourself, I am moving forward and every step is worth honoring. Every line you record is a brick laid down in the bridge between your present and your future. When you look back at what you've written, you'll see more clearly the repeating patterns, the bottlenecks that need to be cleared, and most importantly, the progress you've overlooked because you were rushing. No growth ever happens in total silence. Every self-directed person has some way to converse with themselves, and writing is the simplest way to turn that conversation into a system, a mirror, reflecting your inner world more clearly than any spoken words. You can start with 3 things. Something you did today that made you proud, one thing you learned, no matter how small, and one thing you want to improve. These are the 3 essential breaths to keep your journey alive and directed. No need for flair, no need for perfection, just honesty. The more honest you are with the page, the clearer you become with yourself. And clarity, not motivation, is what keeps you going in the long run. Documenting your journey is also how you build belief that doesn't rely on external outcomes, when others don't yet believe in you, when life remains silent, when nothing guarantees success. It's your written words that will remind you, I got through this. I can keep going. That belief doesn't come from the outside. It is accumulated day by day through each acknowledged action. And when you keep the habit of writing your journey, you'll begin to change how you live. You live slower to observe. Live deeper to understand yourself. And live with more intention because you know every choice today is the material for tomorrow's story. Successful people don't always have extraordinary beginnings, but they are people who acknowledge their process. So when doubt appears, they have proof to move past it. Don't let your journey be just a vague memory. Turn it into a clear foundation, because once you can look back and see the movement, you'll no longer feel stuck. The journey of inner growth never happens loudly. It is woven from private moments, silent conversations with yourself, and lines no one else reads. But those lines are the foundation that allows you to walk more steadily, more boldly, and farther. There will be days when you don't want to write anything. Days of exhaustion, days of confusion, days when nothing feels worth noting. But those are exactly the days when you need to write the most, because writing isn't for recording victories, but for keeping the heartbeat of commitment. Each page you write today becomes a guiding light for your future self. At some point, when you're unsure of where you're going, when everything seems blurry, when doubt resurfaces, you'll be able to turn back to what you wrote and realize you're not lost. You're simply in the middle of a stretch that hasn't yet reached its destination. But you are still going, and that is what matters most. The difference between someone vague and someone with belief lies here. The person with belief leaves a trail. They don't let their journey fade into oblivion. They write, they look, they learn, and they keep going. If you want to believe in yourself more deeply, don't seek inspiration. Start documenting your journey, even just a short entry each day, because that very act turns vagueness into a map, turns memory into a lesson, turns progress into evidence, and turns you from someone who doubts themselves into someone who believes in the power of every step they take. No one can fully see themselves without a mirror. No matter how intelligent, insightful, or disciplined you are, you will still have blind spots, areas you cannot recognize on your own through subjective observation. That is why feedback, when received properly, is not criticism, but illumination. Working alone can foster focus, but if you rely solely on internal evaluation, you can easily fall into one of 2 extremes, either underestimating yourself or living in an illusion of progress that hasn't yet reached real depth. A timely piece of feedback can open a whole door of awareness. It doesn't just help you see what you're doing wrong. More importantly, it helps you see how much better you could be. Mature individuals don't seek feedback for praise. They seek it for clarity. They don't need anyone to validate their worth, but they're always open to refinement. They understand that feedback from a trustworthy source doesn't make them smaller, it makes them sharper. And the more you grow, the more you'll realize that quality feedback rarely comes from the noisy majority. It comes from a few people who are discerning, honest, and have high standards. People who won't be easily satisfied with you. It could be a strict teacher, a blunt friend, or someone a few steps ahead. They don't speak to please you, they speak to help you see. And you must be brave enough not to run away when the truth is uncomfortable, because sometimes what you most need to hear is exactly what makes you most uncomfortable. But those are the very truths that awaken you. Good feedback is not blame, it is information. And a courageous person is one who processes information without letting the ego get in the way. You don't have to agree with every piece of feedback, but you need to learn how to listen, to perceive another angle. Because true success doesn't come from excelling in your own bubble, but from adapting and evolving in the real world. Without feedback, you'll move forward in familiar loops. With feedback, you can correct course and begin to fine-tune your direction. Feedback is the map for those who dare to go far. If you want to become excellent in any field, actively seek people who can reflect back what you cannot see yourself. Don't wait for mistakes to become too costly before you listen. Learn to ask proactive questions. What can I do better? What am I not noticing that others might clearly see? What am I unintentionally communicating? When you start asking those questions, you're peeling away the protective layer of ego and replacing it with a growth mindset. And that's the turning point of any true growth journey. But feedback only becomes powerful when you choose the right people. Don't let uninformed opinions shake you. Don't let criticism from those who don't live your life change your course. Only those who've dared, who've trained, who've overcome themselves possess insights deep enough to offer valuable feedback. And you must also build your inner strength so you don't collapse under harsh feedback, because sometimes what they point out will hit your ego, make you feel hurt, feel unrecognized. But if you can move past that initial emotion, you'll find the real gift underneath, a version of yourself you've never seen, waiting to be unlocked. Receiving feedback is also how you train yourself to detach from personal emotions. You learn to observe information as an analyst rather than defend yourself like someone under attack. And the more you practice this, the farther you'll go, because you're no longer confined by the limits of your current awareness. Exceptional success doesn't come from always being right. It comes from correcting mistakes quickly. And quick correction comes from listening early, deeply, and to reliable sources. You may be on the brink of a breakthrough, but if no one points out what you're missing, you'll keep repeating the same cycles without knowing why. One deep piece of feedback can save you months or even years of fumbling in the dark. And sometimes just one timely reminder can shift your entire strategy. Don't let your ego blind you to opportunities for growth. Learn to listen, not to please anyone, but to become the best version of yourself. Someone who isn't afraid of feedback is someone moving quickly, because they understand this. Feedback doesn't define who you are. It illuminates who you could become. And if you have the courage to face the truth, you'll have the power to change that truth. Every time you listen and adjust, you move closer to refinement. You don't have to change everything in a day. Just let each piece of feedback be an opportunity to tweak one small corner. And over time, the entire picture changes. Sharpness doesn't come from always being right. It comes from continuous learning, continuous adjustment, and the willingness to let truth mature you instead of letting it wound you. And the most precious part is this: no one is forcing you to change. But if you dare to grow from what others point out, you're claiming the right to lead your life instead of letting it be steered by complacency. The eye cannot see itself, but with a clear mirror, it can adjust its vision. Feedback, if you're humble enough to accept it, is the mirror that keeps you from losing yourself. And the one who dares to face themselves in the mirror each day is the one truly growing. You cannot maintain high standards if you live every day in a low-standard environment. Inner strength does not come from within alone. It also comes from how you choose what is allowed to exist around you. Humans are adaptable creatures, but that very adaptability is a double-edged sword. If you stay around stagnant people long enough, stagnation will start to feel normal. If you live in a permissive environment long enough, you'll begin to believe that living without effort is perfectly acceptable. Because the environment doesn't just affect your behavior, it silently rewrites your entire way of thinking. And once your thinking system is worn down, you'll no longer be able to see your true potential. People with strong willpower are not those who resist their environment best, but those who choose the right environment so they don't have to resist it at all. You don't need to be a lone warrior among mediocrity. You need to find a circle strict enough to constantly stretch you. The people who force you to grow aren't doing so by criticizing you. They simply live by such high standards that you can no longer afford to be lenient with yourself if you want to keep up. They don't need to motivate you, because their presence alone is a silent challenge. Either you rise or you're left behind. People like that, hold on to them tightly, because they are mirrors reflecting the version of yourself you could become. They make it impossible for you to stay complacent. They expose limits you once thought were just your personality when in fact they're merely untrained habits. Every conversation with them is a subtle yet deep nudge, prompting you to ask, am I truly living up to my real capabilities? Don't think of connection as a matter of chance. It is a life strategy, because you become like the people you spend the most time with. If you regularly engage with those who speak superficially, you will gradually lower the depth of your thoughts. If you continually surround yourself with people who lack standards, you will begin to bend your own moral boundaries. But if you actively create an environment filled with discipline, deep thinking, and high values, you won't need motivation every day. The environment will lift you naturally. And the most beautiful part is, you always have the power to choose your environment again. You don't need anyone's permission. As long as you are determined, you can begin clearing out the outdated circles that are dragging you down. There's no need for a dramatic cutoff. Simply reduce the frequency of interaction with those who leave you feeling empty after every conversation, and channel that energy into finding or building a community where you can learn, share, and be positively challenged. Sometimes you don't need a lot of people, just a few who are mindful enough, sincere enough, disciplined enough, are enough to completely shift your environment. They don't have to be close friends. They just need to be the kind of people who make it impossible for you to give up on yourself. And what's remarkable is this: when you deliberately elevate your environment, you're also elevating yourself. Because the environment is not just background, it is an extension of you. Every time you walk into a room where everyone is striving to become better, you will no longer feel like your effort is an outlier. You will see reflected in their eyes the same desire to break limits. And from there, you are no longer alone in your growth journey. Truly mature people don't seek environments to be praised. They seek places that make them more serious, more refined, more insightful each day. They understand that when the environment is strong enough, you no longer live by emotion, you live by standards. And that is real freedom. Have the courage to reassess the environment you're living in. Ask yourself, do the people I talk to every day make me want to grow? Does the place I spend most of my time push the better version of me forward? Am I becoming more profound, or am I being pulled into surface-level distractions? If your answers leave you uneasy, that's a sign something needs to change, because you cannot live deeply in a shallow environment. You cannot reach far if you're surrounded by people afraid of change. And you cannot maintain a steel mindset if you're constantly worn down by invisible leniency. No one can grow exceptionally in an environment that pulls them backward, but you can create a new gravitational pull by boldly choosing again. Don't fear loneliness in the transition. The loneliness of someone moving forward is always better than the false noise of stagnant circles. And soon you'll realize, when you upgrade yourself, a new environment will find you, because people who are growing will always recognize each other. They don't need to say much. A single look, a way of asking a question, a silence filled with depth is enough to know you're in the right place. Protect your environment like you protect your mind, because in the end, you are the average of everything you allow to exist beside you. And if you're truly serious about personal growth, start with the simplest step. Choose again who you allow into your life. Those who force you to grow are the most precious gifts this journey can offer you. A strong will cannot thrive in a weakened body. You could read hundreds of books on positive thinking, self-discipline, and personal development, but if your body is sluggish, stagnant, and lacking vitality, all that theory remains just an idea. The mind and the body are not two separate entities. They are two sides of a single energy stream. If one side weakens, the other cannot stay resilient. When your body is strong, you move with a different kind of presence. Without speaking, people can sense the vitality, the certainty, and the intentionality in every motion. But the most important aspect isn't your physique or muscles, it's the degree to which you have control over yourself. Every time you force yourself to get out of bed early to move, every time you finish a workout despite your mind's resistance, you're sending a silent signal to your brain, I control my actions. And that is the core of all discipline, behavior guided by will, not emotion. Training your body isn't about showing off. It's about building the pillar that allows you to face adversity. Your body is your first strategy to overcome mental resistance. Every drop of sweat, every push beyond your physical limits forges your ability to handle pressure without needing to speak a word. That's why it's no coincidence that the most successful individuals maintain a consistent physical training routine. It's not a hobby. It's a ritual to regenerate discipline and recharge energy from the root. A healthy body doesn't just bring endurance, it enhances clarity. Because major decisions should not be made when your body is in chaos and fatigue. Think back to the last time you were exhausted, negative thoughts surfaced, everything felt more serious than it really was, and you gave up easily on problems that were actually quite simple. But after a deep sleep, a heavy workout, or a few deep breaths in a quiet space, everything instantly shifted. That's the clearest proof. Mental strength cannot be separated from physical resilience. One of the common mistakes is believing that physical training is only necessary for athletes or those in physically demanding jobs. The truth is, the more you work with your mind, the more essential physical training becomes. Because when you demand high performance from your brain, your body must be capable of nourishing and regulating the nervous system that supports it. No one can stay alert, decisive, and intensely focused if their heartbeat is erratic, their breathing is shallow, and their lifestyle is misaligned with natural rhythms. Training isn't an extra choice. It's a prerequisite for emotional stability, response control, and sustained presence in your actions. The personal growth journey doesn't live on paper or within lofty philosophies. It begins with the most basic questions. What time do you sleep? When do you wake up? Do you move your body? Do you eat well? Do you allow your body to breathe deeply each day? These seemingly simple questions form the foundation that determines whether you have the energy to pursue the long game. Don't underestimate walking 30 minutes a day, doing a few sets of push-ups, or sweating in the gym. These are not side tacks. They are foundational commitments you make to yourself. A commitment that says, you don't just want to grow mentally, you're building a body strong enough to contain the new energy, because every level of maturity demands a stronger container, and your body is the first container. Those who neglect physical training easily fall into a loop, waking up tired, dragging through the day, compromising by late afternoon, and sinking into disappointment and self-loathing at night. But just by changing one link, starting with movement, the entire chain of reactions can be reprogrammed. When you take control of your workout schedule, you also gain control over your circadian rhythm and the hormones that regulate your emotion. This results in a sharper mind, higher concentration, and more accurate decision-making. You don't need to run marathons. You don't need six-pack abs. You just need to consistently commit to your body. the same way you commit to your goals. Consider each training session as an endurance workshop. Big missions require big endurance, not just mentally, but physically too. And you'll realize the one who controls their breath when exhausted is also the one who stays calm when the world turns chaotic. The body is the most powerful tool you own, and also the most underestimated. Don't wait until illness knocks before you realize how many dreams you've sacrificed simply because you didn't take care of the vehicle that was meant to carry you towards success. A well-trained body is a silent declaration that you are serious about your journey. It is living proof that you don't just talk about change. You act on it every single day, step by step, starting from the most basic level, the physical. Every time you move with intention, you are rebuilding your capacity for self-regulation, and that is the deepest form of power for anyone who wishes to advance in their growth, internal control. From breath to stride, from heartbeat to mindset. You don't train your body to look better. You train to live aligned with the deepest potential within you. Because only when the body is ready does the mind have the space to rise. And once mind and body unite as one, you're no longer just surviving, you're operating your life as a unified, powerful being that nothing can shake. No one lives inside your head more than you do. And for that very reason, the voice echoing in your mind every day is not random. It's a behavioral programming engine, an emotional compass, and an identity-reinforcing mechanism. If you don't learn to manage your inner dialogue, you will become a victim of your own thoughts. How many times have you been ready to step out of your comfort zone only to be pulled back by a tiny voice whispering, "I'll probably fail again"? How many times have you just accomplished something meaningful, yet immediately diminished it with, "I'm still not good enough"? That's not the truth. That's a habit of self-attack, self-doubt, and slowly distorting all your progress. The danger lies in the fact that this voice doesn't shout. It doesn't accuse you loudly. It whispers repeatedly until you no longer notice that you are living under its invisible rule. Every negative inner statement plants a new seed of thought into your nervous system. And if you don't respond in time with an intentional voice, that seed will take root, become a belief, and eventually solidify into identity. That's why you naturally feel less confident, naturally procrastinate, or naturally feel inadequate, because for too long you've allowed your mind to insult you without resistance. The solution isn't to impose fake positivity, nor is it to force yourself to be cheerful all the time. It's to build a disciplined system of inner dialogue, saying the right thing at the right time with the right energy. When you fail, you don't need to say, "It's okay, everything's fine." Instead, say, "I didn't do well, but this proves I'm genuinely playing the game. Next time, I'll adjust." That's disciplined encouragement. Not pampering yourself, but not punishing yourself either. Not denying the mistake, but also not defining yourself by it. A mature individual isn't someone who no longer self-criticizes, but someone who knows how to transform that criticism into practical action. Every time you feel angry at yourself, don't let that emotion linger as self-torment. Let it become a directional force. If you feel weak, don't keep repeating, "I'm so useless." Replace it with, "I'm going to train this ability every day." The words you use with yourself don't just affect your immediate emotions. They reshape how you behave in the world. Language is the operating software of the mind. If you constantly say, "I always procrastinate," then even if you work hard for a day, your internal system is still programmed to revert to the old state. But if you change that sentence to, "I'm rebuilding the habit of acting immediately when needed," then every action you take gets aligned with a constructive psychological trajectory. You don't need to lie to yourself with hollow slogans. You just need to speak truth, but with purpose, the way a strict yet loving coach would speak to their athlete. Imagine yourself as the chief architect of your mental life. Every sentence you utter in your mind is a blueprint, and if you keep drawing distorted lines, don't expect a solid structure to emerge. But if you're careful with every phrase, every formulation, you'll construct a mental architecture strong enough to withstand any pressure. A resilient person isn't someone who doesn't hear negative voices. They're someone who knows how to respond with a language system that silences the negativity. Many people let their inner dialogue run on default, mostly negative, patterns shaped by past wounds. But you can choose to rewrite that script. Through awareness, through observation, through noting each time you feel low, and tracing the clues. What did I just think? What did I just say in my head? If I were my own best friend, what would I say instead? This way you gradually build a new internal vocabulary, solid, accurate, and able to steer you back on course when you stray. The difference between someone who moves forward and someone who stays stuck often doesn't lie in circumstance or ability, but in the quality of conversation they have with themselves each day. The one who moves forward may face the same difficulties as you, but in their head they don't hear, "I can't," but, "Is there another way?" Same problem, but they choose to ask open-ended questions instead of concluding prematurely, and that's the starting point for every real transformation. If you want to change your life, begin by speaking to yourself differently. Not more sweetly, but more accurately. Not more indulgently, but more intentionally. And something miraculous will happen. You'll no longer feel the need to strain to change, because when you stop the spiral of self-criticism, you finally free up the energy to act in new ways. You're no longer trapped in the past, no longer defined by mistakes, and no longer drowning in the cruel conclusions you once assigned yourself. Inner dialogue is where all change begins. When you master that conversation, you don't just change your thoughts, you change your way of living. And from there, no failure can pull you down too far, no external judgment can outweigh the steady voice within. Because you've learned how to speak to yourself like a firm teacher, a compassionate friend, and a leader who doesn't negotiate with stagnation. From this moment on, let every word you think, every sentence you whisper inside be a deliberate step on the path of growth. Because if you speak long enough, accurately enough, and persistently enough, that inner voice will no longer be a judge, but a guide. And that's when you'll know you are truly living by a new standard. What creates achievement is not grand actions, but the steady repetition of small, unnoticed steps. People don't realize a wall is built brick by brick, but the builder knows that each time he lays one, he's getting closer to the complete structure. Growth works the same way. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need giant leaps. You just need not to stop. Don't quit when you're tired. Don't turn back when you feel lost. Don't belittle yourself when the results haven't shown up. The problem for many is thinking that to succeed you must always perform well. They forget that well is the result of repeating enough. An action done 100 times will improve itself, optimize itself, and perfect itself. But if you demand excellence from the first try, you're setting up a false standard, one where procrastination and fear of failure will quickly take over your mind. Don't chase perfection. Pursue consistent presence, because consistent action is your declaration to the universe. I'm serious about this journey. Each day, even just one small step shifts the wheel of your inner evolution. A line you write, a page you read, a thought you record, all of it layers into a solid foundation. Action doesn't have to be big. It only needs to be right and repeated. And if you can keep going when no one is watching, no one is recognizing, and no results are appearing, that's when you truly step into maturity. The secret isn't in motivation, but in rhythm. Motivation is a flame that ignites quickly but dies just as fast. Rhythm is a steady wind that guides the sail forward even when the sun is gone. Successful people are not those always filled with inspiration, but those who work even when they have none. They understand that inspiration comes from action, not the other way around. And if you only act when you feel inspired, you're letting emotions steer your destiny. Be honest with yourself. How many times have you stopped simply because you didn't feel good enough? How many ideas have you buried thinking they weren't great yet? How often have you delayed just because you weren't ready? The truth is, you're never really ready, but you can always start. And from that starting point, progress will naturally unfold if you don't stop. Like a moving car, it's far easier to keep going than it is to get going from a standstill. The biggest resistance always comes at the beginning, but after that, consistent momentum will carry you forward. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. You don't need to be the best to have permission to act. You just need to be honest with yourself and commit. Every day I will move a little, slowly or quickly, but without stopping. Because the real danger isn't in moving slowly. It's in standing still for so long that you lose belief you can move again. Just keep going, even if no one sees. Just keep doing, even if no one acknowledges. Just keep writing, even if no one reads. Just keep learning, even if no one asks. Because in those moments when you choose to continue when no one cares, you're quietly building the strongest version of yourself. Don't measure your worth by speed, measure it by consistency. A person who does one right thing daily, after a year will be vastly different from someone who changes goals every week, stuck in emotional swings. Consistent action doesn't create instant noise, but it rewires your identity. And identity is what sustains lasting results, not fleeting feelings. If there's a day when you feel yourself slowing down, remember, that's okay. What matters is you don't stop for too long. If you happen to take a break, restart the next day. No self-blame, no excuses, just return to your rhythm. Because the truly strong aren't the ones who never retreat, but those who pull themselves back on track without needing to be pushed. Consistent action is a form of life commitment. It shows you've stopped chasing emotions and started stepping into the role of leading your life like a true navigator. You no longer depend on applause or praise. You know where you're heading, and every day you walk toward it on your own 2 feet. No illusions, no vague promises, no justifications. If today you only get one thing done, do it wholeheartedly. If you're tired, slow down, but don't change direction. If you're doubting, remember why you started. And if you feel like quitting, give yourself a day's rest. But don't throw away the journey, because you've already come farther than you think. And if you keep your pace steady, even if slow, as long as you don't stop, then no one can stop you. Not even you. And in the end, remember this: perfection is a trap. Consistency is the path. And only those patient enough to keep stepping forward every day will reach what others only dare to dream. You don't need to explode to create change. You just need to persist intelligently. And that is the difference between someone who's always lost and someone who truly reaches the end.